The DIA, run by its hands-on General Magic Dragon, had a military arm of its own, but could also call upon any of the armed services. And so it was in a near overreaching operation deep inside Cambodia that the Marines and their long-distance choppers were employed along with US IAs. That they all had their targets pinpointed ahead of time was always the best strategy, but even more so for this mission since they could only engage for about 30 minutes and still have enough fuel to make it back from where they weren't even supposed to be. It all went well enough, but near the end a report of a well-hidden supply depot complex came in. We, more as the IA observers, still had firepower left, as well as more fuel, we being only 3, including the pilot. And so we elected to veer off to investigate, meaning to put the place out of business. While the copter fleet turned and headed back toward Vietnam, we found the depot site and sent most of our missiles into it. But, just as we were preparing to leave, took a really bad hit from something very luckily or accurately fired from the ground. We were in a half-controlled descent, our power gone but the rotors still whirling from the downward rush, which would end neither in a soft nor a full crash landing, but tending toward hard, which was slightly less than a crash. We saw the depot's ammo dump blow very large and sky-high, and although this destroyed all the guards and forces on the ground, we were coming down about 600 meters in front of the blast. The jungle for kilometers around would soon be in flames. I tightened my belts and closed my side door. We seemed to land upright, but it was much too fast and hard, and so we tipped and rolled. The main rotor broke and sliced through the pilot's cabin, killing him instantly. The other door gunner's belts broke or were cut, and he flew out, the copter crushing him beneath it. I released my belts and climbed out my door, which was now on the top of the heap. Wondering how long it would be before any curious or angry enemies would come to see what had happened to their supply depot. I had to get through the inferno, on to the other side of the depot where every road would lead toward home. I moved laterally, about a quarter-kilometer north, the heat still very intense, even backing off somewhat at times, and there it was, a gap in the flames, possibly due to a wet, swampy area. This was not a time to wait around, and so I endured the heat while splashing through the wetland, latrine sewer or whatever it was, running until the air was bearable, then dropped to the ground and looked around for a while. Monsoon season had not yet begun, and so the jungle, though always moist, was relatively dry. It was all catching fire so quickly that it threatened to engulf me within a matter of minutes in this firestorm of all hells. Projectiles would soon fill the air. There were 2 one-lane paths serving as roads coming into the back of the loading docks. From the tire marks and their dirt chutes, it seemed that I was on the inbound path, and then I saw a signpost. Its unreadable wordage on the other side, facing away from me, confirming this to be the path for arrivals. I don't like taking a path that has incoming traffic, and so I would soon cut through the jungle a short way to get on the outbound path, which no one else would be traversing for quite a while. Meanwhile, I placed explosives and a tripwire on the inbound path. I tried to call the copter fleet on my ground radio, but got nothing but static. Well, there was no climbable canopy that I could be plucked off of anyway. I was on my own. Apparently no one knew yet. Over 100 kilometers to go. Had to put some distance in between while I was still fresh and energized, but not overdo it. Then walk on steadily only through the deepest night and sleep long by day. For not only could the jungle day roast one alive, but the Khmer Rouge might be about. I checked my boots. I like tight boots, for they give a better feel for the ground and one can't always see too well at night. I tightened them. One boot had a slight cut. I patched it with all-purpose tape. The sun was setting. This was the last evening that I'd use for travel. I just didn't want to stick around the scene. I walked briskly through the night when possible, still high on adrenaline, but kept 10 meters off to the side of the path. I heard a truck, oncoming from ahead, its driver unaware of the traffic pattern, which was common in the third world. I dropped and froze, my camouflage making me part of the foliage. Sunrise was nigh. I headed into the jungle to find a place to sleep, finding 2 good places but proceeding on to a third just to be safe. I slept 12 hours through that steamy day, in the most shade I could find. I didn't resist the heat and the sweat but made friends with them. I would spend the next 2 hours refilling it by swiping dew from the broad leaves. I had not come across any good water sources yet. I surveyed my equipment. Most of it had remained. 1 small pack of explosives, a pistol, a knife, a useless radio, 2 more days of MREs, no ID as usual, spare socks, bullets, jungle ills, pills, matches, some coins, a pad and pen for taking intelligence notes, antiseptic, a small flare, and a survival pamphlet. Then I heard the Rouge out there, probably out on a local recon to secure the night around their camp. At midnight, I was off. I might manage to go 7-8 kilometers a night on average, considering the slow-going portions. I began to slowly add edible vegetation to my diet, as there are reasons to eat other than taste. All went well for 2 more nights and days, the jungle food fully supporting me now, but now I was stuck. A whole Khmer division was getting on the move somewhere nearby. I stayed glued to my deep spot for 3 days, until they were long gone, which gave me more time that I needed to think, and so I thought about everything. First about my journey. It was really beyond me how I would ever make it, for after the long jungle trek there would be too many villages and clearings before I could get to the river and swim across it. Well, all I had to do was to travel unseen, quite an unlikely proposition. It was not that long ago that I was a 16-year-old boy who had filled the walls of his room with scenes of faraway places from National Geographic magazine, and now I was, well, really far away. Well, of course, Magic Dragon would know that a helicopter had been lost. Strangely, it had not blown up right away, but the fuel was leaking, and it would go to blazes, and this within a larger blaze, erasing all trace of it. He would indeed know where we were headed. We both knew that he could not have come to me there, and that I wouldn't have stuck around anyway. This forced rest was good for me, for my legs had been dehydrating, just as what could happen when playing a long match of tennis on a hot day. It had been days since I'd found the last rivulet, and the dew could not keep up with my needs. And then it rained for a day, which was as cooling and refreshing as one could imagine. It seemed that I drank gallons of it. I was restored to my old self just in time to move on with a full canteen. 4 more days passed. I was becoming energized by the walking, though perhaps having lost about 7 pounds. Night was my friend. I could even see the stars sometimes, those ancient fires of home. We are those stars, I thought, but what the heck was I doing on a planet with so many war zones? Every so often I would stop and listen, to hear them before they heard me. Nothing usually. Then a mother and her children at a watering hole up ahead, even though it was late evening. I too, now again desperately needed water. I waited, but ever more villagers kept coming. After an hour of no one, I drank. A woman appeared suddenly, quickly running off when she saw me. The whole village would soon know. So, I backtracked for many kilometers, erasing half of my recent progress. They would still pursue me, though, eventually. So I headed deep into the jungle at a left angle to the road path. Just before dawn, I intersected the path that I had once identified as the inbound path to the depot. Well, what else could I do but take it? I was known on the other path, but this would soon turn into a legend left far behind. I stepped up my pace, expecting to pay dearly for it, and lost energy. I found a sleeping spot, this time making sure it was 4 times removed from the path, then collapsed, exhausted and full of thirst, sleeping 16 hours. The rains saved me again. I floated awake and drank the elixir from the sky. It took me another day to regain my strength, aided by the untasty jungle salad. I walked for 3 more nights, and then the jungle began to thin. I went back in and sat there for a day, not wanting to leave it. I needed a miracle. Another day and night went by. I was tired anyway. I had a Cambodian hat that I'd found along the way somewhere, but my skin was not the right tone, although I could possibly work on it. I would have to find the right clothes too. Yet it wasn't going to work, for people might approach me, and then the jig would be up. A better scheme would have to present itself. I was a bit lost in the jungle's heart of darkness that was called the rainforest to soften its menace. Now I had to find the trailhead where the path resumed after a large and recently cleared open field that the Khmer were going to use for something. It wasn't a place to be seen wandering through, for one, nor wasting time trying to find an entrance that was probably covered by bush, for two. I needed information. I waited for hours, no Khmer. I waited some more. Then way across the large clearing, some lynx-like cats came out from the jungle, and I made note of the spot. Here I would find the continuing trail. I dashed across, and there it was. I entered, all the jungle noises resuming, the odor of dead vegetation returning. I walked on for about 5 kilometers. I shouldn't out during the day, but I was out of water and also needed to put some distance in on the path. A few kilometers later, the bird sound suddenly stopped, and so I rushed silently off the side of the trail, deep into the rainforest. The birds knew that someone was coming, which may have been just me, but they had tolerated me so far, so it had to be a group. I never found out who they were, but they had to be peasants or enemy military. I camped for the rest of the day at the 5th good spot off the trail, taking no chances. I emerged 4 hours after sundown. From here on, every path would lead me more towards home. The ground was getting spongy. Large banyan trees began to appear, as well as cedar and cypress. A swamp was near, but so then might be dengue fever. This drainage basin from the mountains of what were really very large hills would have good stream water up ahead, beyond the deadwood, and so it did, the place looking harmlessly pleasant and sylvan, here in the land of the killing fields. I crossed a rock field to gain the stream, deftly jumping from one to another, which seemed safer than walking slowly. I could not misstep. An ankle injury would doom me. Here I drank and stopped a while to allow time for rehydration. I would need more than information to carry me to the river, after which Vietnam began. But perhaps the general and his DIA troops were out there somewhere. But I heard no rotors. Coincidence was too much to hope for. From the bird's eye view at the top of the mountain, I would plot my next 50 kilometers onto the horizon, keeping out of sight. Last night I had accidentally walked right into a temple, but it turned out to be a deserted ruin. I was still as fit as my younger self, who was on the track team too, but here I was on the trail of madness and death. Nothing happened for a few days, and then I heard the choppers, about a kilometer to the north. My radio had gotten soggy. It was now more than useless. I took off like a bat out of hell, remaining well inside the edge of the jungle. The choppers had found the Rouge and were engaging them near the village they were taking. When it looked like they were just about finished mopping up, I told myself, this is it, do or die. And so I sent up the flare. Since they might think it was some kind of a trap, I ran out and presented myself in the open, in my mud-dried fatigues, and gave the special salute, done with both hands at once. They circled, looking closer, but wary. I brought up both arms and hands to my forehead in salute time and time again. I used my knife to carve some letters into the ground, my short-form ID. They looked. I waited, and waited some more. They landed. Now I will always wonder if I could have made it through the villages and clearings at night. When the fleet landed back at Magic Dragon's field command and he came out to inquire about the mission, the pilot rushed over, acting puzzled, relating that while no one had been lost, they seemed to have gained someone.
Quester, you're late again, but I'm considering it as leave time to make up for it. Welcome back. It was that woman near the drinking hole who told everyone, and thereby me as well, for I have ears everywhere. I knew you would switch to the other path. Come out, wherever you are, and join me in my tent for a drink.